24 Days of Wonder. 24 stories from my 19 years at Santaland on 34th Street. Story 12, GW. To me, GW is Santa Claus. GW had been at Santaland for 6 or 7 seasons when I first started there. He was one of the more accessible veterans for advice and suggestions to the new people during my first training period. He did so in a quiet and friendly way. And unlike most of the rest of the veterans, he focused on the good parts of the job and avoided the horror stories or war stories. Because of our schedules, I never actually witnessed him suited up until my second year. It was an amazing transformation. No one has ever looked better in that outfit than GW. But it was my third year before I got to see him in action. He was part of my crew during my first year as a straw boss. I remember the first day of that season, I put him in a house and then went off to take care of the schedule and my other duties. I came through during my water and checkup rounds about half an hour later and walked in on him in the middle of a visit. It was just a regular visit, a family of a mom, dad, 3 kids. But I was mesmerized. It was not just a textbook visit. It was also reminiscent of all the great storybook or movies about how magical Santa is. I stood in the back corner of the house and watched the next visit. It was just like the first one. And so was the next one. And I stood there watching for well over 20 minutes. If I hadn't been called away to do something, I might have ended up standing there all day. And for the rest of that season, if I was having a rough day, I made sure to spend some time watching GW in the house. That always put me back into the right mindset. GW had a much higher success ratio with frightened children. Little ones are often afraid of Santa. We've all seen the photos of toddlers crying and struggling to get away from Santa. GW did have some of those, but far more often he was able to calm the child. Many children who entered the house weeping and terrified ended up on his knee, taking a nice photo and having a good visit with Santa. The elves noticed it too. Working with GW was a pleasure for all of them. Things were just more consistent and smooth and nice. In the dressing room, he was quiet and unassuming. He got along with pretty much everyone. He would often spend breaks talking about sports or television shows with the other guys. He was a great team player who never complained and never asked for special considerations. Like most of the crew during that first season I had as straw boss, GW also missed some time with illness. He did work every day right up until his voice totally abandoned him. He was back, however, for the last few days of the season. On Christmas Eve, he was the last one I pulled from the house, mainly because I wanted to see him in action for as long as possible. He knew he was the last one out, and when I came to pull him, he asked me if there were still children in the back register area, and I told him that there were. And as we were exiting towards the back door, he asked me in a loud voice, loud enough for all the people in the back area to hear, "Are the toys in the sleigh?" I replied, "Yes, Santa." "Are the reindeer ready?" "Yes, Santa." And as he went through the door, he yelled, "On Dasher, on Dancer, we have work to do." The children near the registers were in total awe. GW was on my crew the following season as well, and I got to see many more magical visits with Santa. And most importantly for me, my 11-week-old daughter Sabrina got to have her first Santa visit with him. Sabrina's mother had been an elf for 2 seasons and a manager for 1, and she found GW to be as magical as I did. We were determined that Sabrina would always have a visit with GW at Christmas. Near the end of that season, I was making my rounds when I noticed 2 teenage boys waiting to see Santa. They appeared more than just a bit rowdy and rough with their language, so I decided to follow behind them into the house. Sure enough, they came in and immediately rushed over to Santa and tried to yank his beard off. I started to intervene, but before I could move a muscle, somehow Santa had managed to get both into a gentle headlock spin them both around, and get them into a sitting position on his bench, one to either side. And the whole time he was ho-ho-hoing. I took a step towards Santa to see if he wanted my help, but he just looked up at me and smiled, shook his head. He talked to those two teenagers for about 3 minutes. During that time, he went from having them around the neck to having his hands around their arms. He patted each on the shoulder as they got up and wished them a Merry Christmas. They wished him one as well, and left. I decided to follow behind the two to make sure they didn't cause more trouble. I needn't have worried. I listened to their conversation as they left, and they were talking about how they really needed to grow up. Came all the way here from Coney Island to pull the guy's beard. We're really dumb, you know? The other one asked his friend if he had any cash on him. I want to get a copy of that picture. Yeah, me too. I got some cash. Not every day you get to meet Santa Claus. Yeah, I know. They ordered their pictures, and off they went. Well, I headed back to GW to see what he had said to them. But he was in the middle of another visit, and I didn't get a chance to ask him later that day. The next 2 days he was off. I did ask him on his day back, and he said he didn't remember the incident. And I asked him years later, and he gave me the same answer. But GW's life took him elsewhere the following year, and he did not come back to Santaland that year or the year after. Sabrina never had another visit with him. She did, however, have some amazing visits with Santa Richard every year. And after Jim Dow took over Santaland, then when it turned over to Scott and I, we made, I believe, great improvements every year to the operation. Each year the crew got better, the seasonal manager team got better, the guests seemed happier as a whole, and photo sales kept going up. After Scott and I had run the place for a few seasons, I felt like we were very close to being the best we could be. But we knew that there was something essential missing. We couldn't figure out what. Just a few months prior to another season, I ran into GW on the street just outside the store. I was overjoyed and asked him if he wanted to return to Santaland. He said he wished he could. He could use the money. He missed Santaland. But his knees could no longer withstand the rigors of a full season. However, the day before, one of the people offered a manager's position and declined the job. And on the spot, I offered the position to GW. After a brief discussion of what the job entailed, he accepted. He was, of course, as marvelous as a manager as he had been when he would wear the suit. And every once in a while, he would wear the suit again. He was the missing element. He brought his special magic back to that already magical place. And every season he was there, just kept getting better and better. The reason for that is, I believe, because GW is Santa Claus.